We're delighted here to have at the City Club of Chicago the Attorney General of the state of Illinois, who is, by all measure of polls, very, very solid in his race for the Republican nomination for governor of Illinois. He is an erudite man, a skilled man, a lawyer, a former boxer, a fighter. And I am deeply honored whenever I see him because his fight has been frequently, as you know, where he has overcome bouts of ill health, sadnesses in his family. He has shown great resolve. He is a fighter, and in fact, he may well be a winner. I give you the Attorney General, the state of Illinois, candidate for the Republican nomination, state of Illinois, Jim Ryan.
Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for that very warm welcome. And Tom, you don't have to emphasize the boxing too much. Some of my opponents, current and former, maybe thought I boxed a little too long. They may be right. But thank you very much for that kind introduction. I want to also acknowledge Paul Green, Professor Green. I want to also acknowledge Jay Doherty, who I've had a chance to visit with during lunch. And certainly all the folks that are here, including my respected opponents, Pat O'Malley and our Lieutenant Governor. The City Club of Chicago is a great organization, and I very much appreciate the invitation to say a few words this afternoon. And I will try to be brief and try to be direct, and then be happy to answer some questions. First, let me tell you a little bit about myself. You may know me, but let me just kind of remind you of some of the things about myself and my family. I grew up in Villa Park in DuPage County. That's where I announced my candidacy, in front of the home I grew up in. My father was Irish, and my mother was Italian. Actually, my mother was born in Italy. And I have an Irish face, but I guarantee you I have an Italian appetite, which probably shows in my waistline. But my mother was Italian. I am the product of Catholic schools. My wife and I have been married for 34 years. We have 6 children, and we have 4 grandchildren and another on the way. And we're very proud of them as well. I served as an assistant prosecutor in DuPage County for 5 years, and then I was in the private practice of law for 8 years. In fact, my former law partner, Jack Dare, is now on the federal bench in the federal district court. Very good lawyer. And then I was state's attorney, as you know, for 10 years. Was elected in 1984, 1988, and 1992. And for the last 2 terms, I've been your attorney general. Now, as I travel the state and talk to voters, and we all talk to voters in every part of the state, it's clear that people want leadership that they trust, and frankly, they want leaders who share their values, they want leaders who keep their promises, and they want leaders who get results. When I ran for Attorney General, I made certain promises to voters, and I think that I've kept those promises. I said that I would intensify our efforts in the Attorney General's office to increase public safety and personal security, especially for children, especially for women, and especially for the elderly, and I believe I've kept that promise. I promised that I would put a special focus on children's issues. Throughout my public life, which has now been about 17 years, I have always put a special focus on children's issues, whether it's child support, enforcement, or improving the administration of child support, dealing with the problem of abuse and neglect of children. We established in DuPage County, when I was state's attorney, the first child advocacy center in the state. We have focused on better health care for children, and I think I've kept my promise to do more for kids in Illinois. After the Columbine massacre, I formed a task force, an education and law enforcement task force. And with their help and the legislature's help, we developed and passed the most comprehensive school safety program in the nation. And the men and women in the Attorney General's office, I think, have a lot to be proud of, and it passed with very strong bipartisan support. When I ran, I said I would work to improve public health, and I would demand fairness from providers for patients. And we did that when we created the second in the country's health care bureau, which advocates on behalf of patients here in Illinois. And I said I would fight for consumers. I said that I would work hard for a clean and safe environment, and I believe we've kept that promise as well. But the most important responsibility of the Attorney General, and frankly the governor or any public official, is to always put the public interest before any special interest. And I believe that I've done that, and I will certainly do that if I'm governor of Illinois. Now, when I announced my candidacy in early August, I said that improving public education was my first and top priority. The most important thing that we can do for our children after loving them is to provide them with a quality public education. And education is not only important, of course, to our children and to us as parents, but education is critically important to business in our state. Because if we're going to keep jobs in Illinois, and now there's a great focus on the importance of economic development and jobs, if we're going to keep jobs in Illinois, then it's clear that we have to have a quality public school system, or we won't bring jobs to our state, nor will we keep businesses in Illinois, because businesses need an educated and skilled workforce. Although we've made gains in education, we still have a long way to go. We have a growing teacher shortage, especially in the inner city and in rural parts of Illinois. We have a problem retaining teachers, especially in the first 5 years after graduation. And we clearly, although we have some terrific teachers who are really making a difference every day in the lives of children, we have to improve teacher quality. Illinois lags far behind other states like North Carolina, Florida, Ohio, in the number of nationally board certified teachers. North Carolina has 3,661 master teachers. Florida has 2,256 master teachers, and Ohio 1,334. In Illinois, there are only 347 master teachers. We need more mentors for young teachers. One of the most troubling issues facing our state is the problem of children's inability to read at grade level. The problem is not confined to the inner city. Frankly, it's not confined to the inner city or rural schools. It's a statewide problem, and it affects minority children and all children. But I think all the experts tell us, and I think it's clear in our state, that there is a correlation between poverty and children not reading at grade level. For example, there are 800 elementary schools in our state with over 50% of their students living in poverty. In these high poverty schools, there's a greater number of students who aren't reading at grade level. So we need to concentrate our attention and our resources on schools with high concentration of poverty students who are not doing as well as they could. On Monday, I unveiled my plan for education. And let me just say that I'm excited about a lot of these proposals because it gives us, I think, a way of targeting more resources to the communities and schools that need the most help. As governor, I want to find more education dollars for reading programs. And I'll double the state's reading program from $80 million to $160 million over 4 years. These funds will be directed to effective reading programs that emphasize individual instruction. Programs that produce results will be funded, and those that aren't producing results won't be funded. Reading, in my administration, will be the new Illinois First. I'll expand the Teachers Scholarship Program that we currently have in Illinois with an emphasis on schools with the highest concentration of poverty. I'll create 500 scholarships for aspiring teachers who agree to teach in urban and rural schools with the greatest needs. The $7,500 scholarships will help us attract more teachers to the profession, and particularly to schools with children from low-income families. I think the way to improve reading is to target money towards the most promising programs. To increase the number of nationally board-certified teachers, I've proposed that we increase financial incentives to encourage teachers to work towards national certification. I've proposed even larger incentives for master teachers who agree to work in the inner city or in rural schools. I want to match the most talented teachers with the most challenged schools. As governor, I want to expand Illinois' commitment to our statewide mentoring program. This concept, I know, has been embraced by most people in the business community, most teachers, and other public and school officials. Illinois is facing a teacher shortage, and a major reason is attrition. It's estimated that over half of our young teachers leave the profession within 5 years. So mentoring, according to all the experts that we've talked to, mentoring will help teachers better adjust to the rigors of their profession and to hone their skills. A commitment to more teachers, better teachers, and making a financial investment in early childhood education and third-grade reading programs, in my judgment, will improve public education in Illinois. My plan also calls for an expansion of charter schools. In Chicago, all of the available charters, as you know, are now committed. And charter schools provide, I think, enormous opportunity and allow schools to innovate to get better results. And so I support expanding the program. Illinois has made progress in developing and staying with our academic standards, the learning standards in Illinois. It's important that we stay on course and that we move ahead with student teaching and, student testing. The new federal education bill, as you know, requires more testing from 3rd to 8th grade and then 1 year in high school. And Illinois must quickly adopt the new annual system of testing. As governor, I'll commit 51 cents of every new dollar. It's a commitment that's currently being made by our governor. And I'll support an appropriate multi-year foundation level for every student in the state of Illinois. And then finally, consistent with our resources, I'll support a school construction funding program. An infusion of new state dollars will be needed to repair crumbling schools and, frankly, to address the growing enrollments in our schools. Now, there are many other elements to the plan, but you know, the emphasis will clearly be on, again, reading programs, standards, accountability, innovation, teacher quality, and investment in early childhood education, which is so important. Now, let me talk for a minute about fiscal discipline, because I do think that's important. A few weeks ago, I presented a plan, our approach, Carl Hawkinson and I, in terms of fiscal policy for the state of Illinois. Here's the bottom line. This state has been spending too much money, and we haven't saved enough money. For the last 3 years, our end-of-year balance continues to decline. We went from $1.5 billion when Governor Edgar left office to 1.1 end-of-year balance, and now it's projected to be under $900 million. Clearly, we're going in the wrong direction. What happens when you overspend is what's now happening in Springfield, where this administration is forced, in some respects now, to try to balance the budget on the backs of hospitals and poor people and the disabled. That's not the way to do business in this state. And I will change the way we do business in this state, should I be fortunate enough to be your governor. Maintaining a healthy end-of-year balance helps our cash flow and permits us to pay our bills on time, which is also very important. It gives us a cushion if we experience fluctuations in revenue. So as governor, I want to build our end-of-year balance to equal 5% of the GRF. And I also want to see a real rainy day fund, a savings account that has at least $500 million. Last year, the state put $225 million in the fund, but it wasn't from our bulging general revenues. The money came from the tobacco settlement, $225 million. If we had done that every year for the last 3 years, we would be in better position, certainly have more flexibility to deal with the budget crisis we currently experience. My last point, frankly, deals with our current practice of legislative member initiatives. Every year, millions of dollars have been set aside in the state budget for pork barrel projects. There's virtually no oversight or accountability by the legislature. The practice of allocating member initiative monies in a lump sum makes it almost impossible to set limits, set priorities in terms of our state spending. As governor, I want a balanced budget. I'll veto any budget that's given to me that isn't balanced, and member initiatives, as we now know them, will be over. As governor, I think one way to limit state spending is to set priorities. And I will say no to spending proposals that I think are inconsistent with our values and squander our resources or lower our standards. To reduce the number of state jobs and to save money, I support an early retirement initiative. Governor Edgar did that in 1991 when our state was experiencing difficult times, and I think that can work again. To eliminate waste, I'll sign an executive order creating a Taxpayers Accountability Commission, which will be headed by a business or civic executive and a group of efficiency experts and accountants that can go out and find the waste, the duplication, the programs that are no longer needed, and make recommendations in writing to me and my administration, which we will make public, and I believe we're going to save a lot of money by doing that. It's very important that state government live within its means and set priorities. In addition to controlling spending, a Ryan Hawkinson administration will work to raise our ethical standards. And I'll require top-level executives under the control of the governor to sign a code of conduct as a condition of employment. And I also intend to sign an executive order reestablishing the ethics board that we once had in our state. Now, one of the top priorities for me as governor, and I think we all recognize this, is the importance of jobs. And that will be one of my top priorities. First, I will appoint a new deputy governor for economic growth and new technology. I'll create a council of economic advisors comprised of business and labor leaders to be able to work with the deputy governor and work with me to help me identify key issues and identify solutions to some of the problems and ways that we can create more jobs in our state. I want to work to maintain a predictable, reliable business environment, which means holding down taxes, holding the line on taxes, eliminating unnecessary regulations that sometimes become barriers for businesses to grow, and to work at improving public education. My role as governor will be to help Illinois businesses grow jobs. Illinois offers now a full mix of incentives, grants, and loans to entice businesses to come to our state and to stay here. As governor, I'll conduct a complete review of our state's economic incentives to determine which ones are the most effective. Consistent with available resources, I'll invest and expand our infrastructure. A major focus of our administration will be new technology, because new technology is an untapped resource for our state. Illinois is a transportation hub, and I understand the importance of air transportation and dealing with the delay we had prior to September the 11th. Although I don't support a southern runway at O'Hare Airport, because I think it would just be unfair to suburban homeowners, I do favor reconfiguration of runways, including a north runway, and western access. And by the way, without a southern runway, we'll be able to have western access, assuming we can find the money. We can have western access with less destruction to business and homes. And I'm a strong supporter of a third airport at Peatone. Because look, there's only so, regardless of what your vision for O'Hare is, there's only so far out you can build any airport. Where does it go next? So I think the ultimate answer to preserving market share, the ultimate answer, long-term answer to our transportation needs and the jobs that it will create is a third airport at Peatone. It'll be an economic engine for the south suburbs, just like O'Hare has been for that part of the state. One of my most important priorities, if I'm fortunate enough to become your governor, will be improving health care. It's an important issue for me for obvious reasons, but it's an important issue for every family, for every person. It's important for some reasons that I think you understand. Cardinal Bernardine once said, and I see Father here, Cardinal Bernardine once said that access to quality, affordable health care is a basic human right, and I agree with that. We have more than 1 million Illinois citizens that don't have health insurance, and that includes still uninsured children and many of the working poor. The problem crosses all geographic lines. For example, 64% of the uninsured don't live in Chicago, and many of the uninsured are working in a lot of small businesses. And so although we've made progress in the area of kid care, there are a lot more uninsured children insured today than before. We still have, I'm told, about 40 or 50,000 children that are eligible for kid care that are not enrolled. We have to deal with the problem of senior citizens that can't afford prescription drugs. And the state's Medicaid system of reimbursing health care providers for the needs of 1.4 million low-income residents who are elderly, disabled, drawing public aid or working in jobs that offer no other health insurance has recently been described by the Chicago Tribune as a complex hodgepodge of partial subsidies. The antiquated structure, the Tribune pointed out, of the program can't keep up with the realities of modern care and costs of health care. Illinois clearly has to do a better job of serving hospitals and patients and those living in nursing homes. As governor, I'll work to enroll all of the kids that are currently eligible for kid care, and to the extent we can find the resources, I support family care. I believe that we need to examine ways to help small businesses provide health insurance. Many of the uninsured in Illinois, as I said before, work for small businesses. And small business is the backbone of our state and our economy. Illinois should encourage small business pools for insuring workers to bring down the costs. And as governor, I'll create a task force to take a look at how we can revamp our Medicaid program in the state of Illinois, and to make some suggestions and recommendations and then implement those changes in a logical way. The state has to meet its obligations, its current obligations. That's only fair to hospitals and other health care providers. To the extent we can, we have to raise reimbursement levels, which are too low, certainly in many areas. We have to, it seems to me, increase the federal dollars. Our formula is inadequate. We should get more federal money. We're a 50-50 state. We should have more federal dollars poured into our Medicaid system, and that will certainly help the poor in this state. And I have a good relationship with the Speaker and many of the congressional leaders who have endorsed my candidacy, and I will work very hard to try to make that happen. Health care is important, and as governor, I'm going to make it a priority. Finally, let me just say this, that the first responsibility of government, any government, federal or state, and we heard the President very eloquently explain that the other night, the first responsibility is to keep people safe. As Attorney General, I understand that. And if I'm governor, I am going to stay focused on combating crime. I'm going to work very closely, as I have as Attorney General and State's Attorney, with crime victims to help them rebuild their lives. And I'm committed to improving the accuracy and the fairness of our criminal justice system. So there are a lot of issues. You know, there are many more issues than those, but you know, those are my priorities. I mean, people, frankly, what I see sometimes happening in a legislature doesn't reflect what ordinary people care about when they get up in the morning. They care about their kids' education. They care about better health care. They care about having a decent job so they can raise their families. They care about being safe at home and their kids in school. And those are the things, in my judgment, that really matter. There are a lot of other issues. I'm not saying they're not important. But we can't be all things to all people. I won't try to be if I'm elected your governor. I will try to be sensitive to people's needs. I'll listen to people. Even if people don't agree with me, I will respect them and listen. But ultimately, a governor's got to set priorities, and a governor's got to fight for what he or she believes. And I will if I'm governor of Illinois. Thank you so much, City Club, for inviting me, and I've enjoyed being with you.
Thank you, Jim. We have speakers there at the rostrum or at the podium. Make your questions brief, terse, and tell us who you are and who you represent. The first speaker is?
Patrick O'Malley, Senator Patrick O'Malley, candidate for governor, Republican primary. Attorney General Ryan, you said early on in your remarks that there are many things that you made commitments and pledges to do when you ran for Attorney General. Specifically, I'm familiar with your campaign back in 1992 because we actually met with you in Crestwood at a function that was hosted at the House of Hughes. Now, I want to read from a press release from August '93. Attorney General Ryan said he will establish, this is a quote, Ryan said he will establish a new public corruption prosecution unit within the Attorney General's office and will work with local states' attorneys to target cases of official misconduct in government. And he will seek legislative authority as Attorney General to indict and prosecute cases of bribery, fraud, bid rigging, and other public corruption. End of quote. Recently, there has been a revelation made very public, although it's been relatively well known in Springfield for some time, about the need to inquire about monies that were perhaps allegedly mishandled in the Secretary of State's office. You have launched an investigation of that, to the best of my knowledge. At least that's what's been announced in the
Is there
press.
a question here somewhere?
I certainly do. I certainly do, Attorney General, and it's one of the most important questions that people of Illinois want to know. You made this commitment in 1993 when you were running for office. You stated as much when you were before us in Crestwood that you would
The
do
senator understands that
And I'm
we
getting
have
right to-
others behind him. Will you please ask the
that.
question?
I certainly will. You presided for the last 8 years as Attorney General of the state of Illinois. And in that period of time, the most serious corruption that has ever faced this state that resulted in 39 convictions here in Illinois has taken place. If you would not lift a finger in that prosecution, how are we to expect that you as Attorney General, as Governor of the state of Illinois, will root out public corruption?
Well, it's a nice political statement, Pat. But let me just say this. I've spent a lifetime in law enforcement. You haven't. I've spent
I've spent a lifetime as a citizen.
Just a minute. Senator, I got to tell you this. There isn't any rejoinder. There are questions that are going
Fine.
to be brief, and the speaker, give the speaker the courtesy of answering.
Absolutely.
And you're done.
Senator, I've spent my entire public life holding public officials accountable when they break the law. The license for bribe scandal began and is in progress and is a federal investigation. It is irresponsible for a state law enforcement agency like the Attorney General to conduct a concurrent or parallel investigation when there's a federal probe that's ongoing involving certain issues that are basically identical under state or federal law. And so it would not have been appropriate for me to investigate that case. And of course, the United States Attorney's Office and our office talk, and if they had needed my help, they would have asked us. But I will tell you that as State's Attorney and as Attorney General, I have sent plenty of public officials to prison and convicted many people that violated the public trust. And that's exactly what I'll do when I'm governor.
Thank you.
You can clap just to make me feel good.
Jeff Berkowitz, host and producer of Public Affairs, airing every Monday night at 8:30 p.m. Channel 21 throughout the city of Chicago and in many suburbs in the north and west.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. That's your question. Next one.
Okay. Attorney General, you were talking at the end of your speech.
Be gentle, Jeff.
Pardon?
Be gentle.
I'm always gentle.
All right.
Softballs, you know. You were mentioning at the end of your talk about the ordinary people and what's important to them. And I would think one of the things that would be important to ordinary people would be political ads and accuracy in those ads. The lieutenant governor, your opponent, has run an ad accusing you of being extremist with respect to abortion, asserting that you are extremist because even in the cases of rape and incest, you would say that abortion should be illegal. And as I understand it, that's your position. Put aside whether that's extremist, that you think that abortion should be illegal, even in the case of rape and incest, then you in turn have run an ad accusing the lieutenant governor of being deceptive. So my question is, what's deceptive about her ad?
I think it misleads voters because it suggests that a governor can do certain things when a governor can't, whoever's governor. I'm pro-life. Everyone knows it. I don't know if this is some epiphany people are having. I'm pro-life. I make no apologies for it. But I also understand that governors have to obey the law. What we're supposed to be talking about when we talk to voters is what a governor can and can't do. We're supposed to not be talking about our own personal moral views. We're supposed to be talking to voters about policy choices. And there are, within the law, things that a governor can do. Support parental notification, parental consent. A governor can limit an extension of taxpayer-funded abortions. A governor can, perhaps, it's unfortunate, in my judgment, what happened on the partial birth abortion law in the Nebraska bill, but a governor can sign a bill, if it's constitutional, to ban partial birth abortion, which I think is an abomination. Now, let me just say that there are more things that a governor can do, but they have to, any governor, including me, and I will follow the law, and I will obey the Constitution. There are certain things the governor can and can't do. And that's where I think the ads are misleading, with all due respect.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Attorney General. Joe Wiegand, Executive Director of Family Taxpayers Network. Perhaps we were unable to investigate corruption because as a state we were too busy suing businesses. In a case of live by the sword, die by the sword.
Joe, is that a loaded question?
Thank you, sir. No, but I've got one coming up. In a case of live by the sword, die by the sword, Illinois taxpayers are now being sued by trial lawyers for the enforcement of a 10% contingency contract you endorsed as Attorney General on the tobacco lawsuit. First, could you explain your judgment in signing a 10% contingency on such a prospectively large award? And secondly, can you explain why you chose to attend political parades rather than the federal arbitration panel hearing in San Francisco? Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Pat O'Malley.
That one's from my heart and taxpayers' hearts, Jim. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Pat O'Malley. First of all, let me say this. I'm very proud of the work of the Attorney General's office. We have a $9+ billion civil judgment, the largest in the state's history, $9.1 billion. That is resulting in about little less than $300 million every year at a time when we desperately need more money for things like health care. I think about $165 million of the settlement money was used to expand the circuit breaker program for senior citizen pharmaceutical drugs. So I'm very proud of the settlement. When we executed the contract, it was subject to an appropriation by the legislature. It was I believe, the smallest, it was the lowest contract in terms of what they could potentially recover in the country when we signed it. And as far as attorney's fees, we're in court fighting the lien case.
Mr. Attorney General, Michael Bauer, I'm a City Club member. I want to take you back to the issue of abortion rights and talk about specifically the governor's role. in the event the United States Supreme Court overturns Roe versus Wade and decides that the issue is to be determined on a state-by-state basis, and you're governor, would you sign a bill sent to you by the legislature authorizing Illinois women to get an abortion under any circumstances? And if so, can you define what those circumstances are?
Well, Roe versus Wade hasn't been overturned. No governor in 28 years or however many years it's been since Roe versus Wade was decided has ever been presented a bill, to my knowledge, to eliminate all abortions. It's not going to happen because it can't happen. Now, certainly a governor won't be able to sign a bill that's on its face unconstitutional. So with all due respect, that is not a real policy issue or choice the governor is going to have to make.
Yes, I'm Anthony Cole, Vice President of Haymarket Center. Attorney General Ryan, I have
Yes,
a
sir.
question for you. Recently, there's been a treatment outcome study in Illinois that says the treatment works here in the state of Illinois. In fact, it works very well.
I'm sorry,
treatment
missed
for addictions works very well here in the state of Illinois. There was
Treatment for
a
addiction.
recent outcome study that proves that. And what it says is that when people get treatment, criminal-related activities drop significantly, welfare costs go down, people get employed, on and on and on. And one of the things that's interesting about here in the state of Illinois, about only 1/2% of the state total funding goes to substance abuse treatment. I'm wondering, in light of your emphasis on supporting efforts that work, be it education, what have you, I hope that you would expand upon that and look at substance abuse as well. Would you be more willing to support treatment efforts here in the state of Illinois for addictions treatment?
Well, I think you know this because we've provided some grants to Haymarket, and let me just say, the drug problem, despite our best efforts, is still real. There are so many children, especially, that are using and abusing drugs, and some addicted to drugs. And I'd like to think that all of us in law enforcement have made a difference. I'm sure we have. But frankly, we have a long, long way to go. And anybody, I think, in my job would recognize that. I do think it's important that dealers, people that possess the amount of drug that really represents the sale of drugs, possession with intent to deliver, and dealers should go to prison. But I do think we have to put more resources in treatment and counseling and treat this as a public health threat to our children and our communities. And, that would be my approach. And I certainly would work with you and others to try to target programs that are working, and I know you have a good program, target programs that are working and give them more money, because we have to do more for treatment.
Attorney General Ryan, I'm Pat Giordano of the energy law firm Giordano and Nealon. Putting the question of the legal fees aside, I was impressed with your leadership on the tobacco litigation.
Thank you. It's nice to hear somebody say something nice.
And I think I think you have a similar opportunity now to show great leadership on the Enron situation. I think that this is critical for ethical business standards in this country. We must preserve the deregulated markets. This has nothing to do with deregulation of electricity. The Enron situation has to do with what I believe is pure fraud on the consumers, on the stockholders and the employees, and I want to know what you're doing about it and whether you agree that there's a potential fraud case that you could bring.
Thank you for the question. We have contacted the fund managers, the lawyers for the pension funds, and they are coming into our office. They have an appointment to come in now so we can talk about it. For a couple of months, we have been part of a working group of attorneys general dealing with this issue. We filed an appearance in the class action suit in Houston, and we are also doing some other things. I don't want to get into everything, but we certainly understand the magnitude of the problem, and we are working with others to try to address it.
Here's the tough follow-up. What about Cheney's refusal to reveal the contacts to the General Accounting Office that he made in developing the energy plan for the nation?
Yeah,
How do you feel about that?
To be honest with you, I mean, I have great respect for the Vice President. I think he's a very good person. I don't know the facts. I wouldn't begin to try to opine on it.
Thank you.
Hi, Larry Horst.
Larry.
Recently, hi, how are you doing? Recently, we've seen a lot of the Catholic schools close. The rumors are there'll be more closings. The Lutheran school system is in trouble. There's a bill in Springfield that would create a scholarship fund, a corporate-generated scholarship fund based on tax credits. Are you familiar with the bill, and would you support it? We're in support of it, of course, but this would allow means testing for the most disadvantaged children to go to schools other than the public schools.
Yeah, Larry, I'm sorry. I'm not familiar with the bill, and I haven't seen it. I have, in this current job, supported tuition tax credits for Catholic and private schools. I would just tell you that.
Yeah, I
But
don't
I'd
see
be
it as a,
happy
I don't
if
see it as a
you can
religious
get that
thing.
to me, either in my political office or in my governmental office. I'm not sure which anymore, but send it to me, and I'll take a look at it.
Okay. Our concern is the enormous expense on the system if all those kids go into the public schools.
It's pending in the legislature now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Sharon Alter, member of the City Club. My question refers to not your 2 terms as Attorney General of the state of Illinois, but your time as State's Attorney of DuPage County, during which time there was the Reuben Cruz case. Certain individuals were tried for conspiracy but found not guilty for conspiracy, but the Reuben Cruz case was on your watch.
Rolando.
I'm sorry, Rolando, thank you. And I'd like you to explain how such a travesty of justice could have occurred on your watch as state's attorney.
Well, I, in that case, did what I thought was right, and I followed the law, and not much I can tell you beyond that. Our office did its job, and as you know, the people that were accused of wrongdoing, all of them, the police, everyone, were completely exonerated.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sean O'Brien. I'm with Blackwell Consulting Services. And
I'm sorry.
Sean O'Brien with Blackwell Consulting. And I just have a quick question about, as governor, would you do anything to address the inequities in school funding that we've had persisting across the state?
Well, I'm not willing to raise taxes. I mean, the last thing I want to do is raise taxes, especially when we have, and we're in the midst of a recession. I am willing, as I said in my remarks, to funnel more money into education, but I want to do it in a targeted way, in a way we can afford it. Clearly, it's my top priority, and you ought to spend money on your priorities. I'm willing to, again, commit 51 cents on every dollar. I'm willing to make sure that the foundation level is appropriate and adequate based on the evidence, and I'll support that multi-year funding. I'm willing to find money by selling bonds to have a school construction program within our means. I'm willing to find waste in government and use some of that money. But I think one of the things that we can do, frankly, is target that money into programs that work. I do believe that spending money is a part of the equation. I mean, I'm a realist. But spending money is not, alone isn't enough. You have to get better results. We have to tie funding to results.
Thank you.
One more short question. Jeff Perkowitz. No plug. Public Affairs. Channel 21, 8:30, every Monday night. Many suburbs. 5:30, 7 o'clock, Channel 19, Channel 35. Okay. Mr. Green asked, we answered. Attorney General, you, I think yesterday unveiled a fairly extensive education plan, and you touched on it today. The one thing I don't think you touched on in the plan, or at least I didn't see it, I haven't read the entire plan, is school choice and school vouchers. And I know you've talked about charter schools, which does introduce an element of choice. But I'm wondering, for those schools that are judged to be failing, say by the State Board of Education, which in the city of Chicago is 1 out of every 2 schools, many schools in East St. Louis and other areas throughout the state of Illinois, would you like to give a choice to the parents of those kids in failing schools and say they can take the money that's currently being spent on their kids and send those kids to the school of their choice? And and if they chose to keep them in the public school, obviously the money would stay there. If they sent them to a private school, the money would go there. It would seem like that would be an effective way to introduce competition, innovation, and help those people you're talking about who are not learning how to read to have opportunities to do so in a different way, different environment. Would you support school choice, school vouchers?
Well, I definitely support school choice. I haven't made a judgment on vouchers, even on a pilot basis, frankly. But I've kind of outlined what I'm going to be talking about. I'm willing, I guess, to look at some voucher plan. But first of all, I don't think it'll pass the legislature. Secondly, it'll be litigated in court for I don't know how long. An element of choice is one way to get more choices to expand charter schools. I think that does give parents more choices. I think, frankly, not everyone agrees with it, but I do. I think homeschooling is a choice, a form of choice, and there's a lot of material now suggesting that it works, and a lot of people in this state certainly believe in it. That's a form of choice. I did support tuition tax credits for private schools, parochial schools. I think that helps. So those are some things that I think we can do.
Okay, the last question is from one of my favorite city clubbers, a former chairperson of the City Club of Chicago, Joyce Saxon.
I don't have to say my name. You've presented some wonderful, very ambitious plans. Have you thought where the money's come from, since the state is already in hock, and so is the federal government? Is there one thing that you can think of now that you would eliminate where we're spending too much money on the wrong thing? One particular program?
Yeah. Well, without trying to identify a job that I would eliminate, we're going to appoint this Tax Accountability Commission to take a look at all the programs, wherever there's duplication or waste or inefficiency, and make recommendations. We will save some money, a lot of money in my judgment, doing that. That's a way of being fair and looking at the whole budget. Do I think we're spending too much money? I couldn't be any clearer. Yeah, I think we spent too much money. We've overspent. We've spent more money over the last 3 years than we were receiving. So I think there's a lot we can do. I think my suggestion that we support an early retirement initiative will reduce the number of state jobs in a fair way, and it'll save money. So there are a lot of different things that we can do, and clearly I'm committed to fiscal discipline.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. Ryan.